everyone. As promised, here are the videos that I am making you because we will not be able to be together for our live Zoom class on Thursday, September 16th, because I will be observing the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. So I'm going to make these videos for you in lieu of our in-class discussion. So what I wanted to just point out before I begin is that the system that I use to make these videos records up to 15 minutes at a time for free. Some of you already know this because you've taken my other online asynchronous classes, or you're in that class this semester, and you're familiar with the system that I use. But if this is new to you, what I just wanted to let you know is that I will continue to record until I'm at about 14 and a half minutes, and then I'll finish where I am. I'll upload that video and then record another one. I expect that this will be probably 2 videos long, maybe a little bit into a third, but we'll just have to see. I try not to talk too quickly. I've been accused of that before on these recordings, so I'm trying to slow myself down. But of course you can repeat and re-listen to any of these. Okay, before I begin, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and summarize some really important concepts that we finished up in class yesterday on Tuesday of this week. And that is understanding our sources of law, meaning that if you were to walk into a physical law library or a virtual online law library, what are all the sources that you will see in that library? Well, we definitely have what we talked about with the branches of government. We have the judicial branch of government, which gives us the court cases that we will read. The legislative branch of government, which gives us statutes that we can read. The executive branch, we won't spend too much on that. And then, of course, the unofficial 4th branch of government, administrative regulations. And for all of those, the cases, the statutes, the administrative regulation, we have both federal and state law. That's a lot of law. In addition to that, we also have the secondary authorities. This is all the other resources that you will meet in a law library that's not primary authority. Let me just go back for a second. When it comes to primary authority, those are all the government sources of law that I just outlined for you. The cases, the statutes, the administrative regulations, the executive orders. If you are reading the words of the government, you are reading the primary source, if you're reading the law itself. And that is true whether you access and read the court case in a book, in a physical law library, if you print it out from the internet, if you read it on the computer or a tablet or a smartphone. The modality of how you access that document is not the defining characteristic of what makes it a primary authority. It's a primary authority because you're reading the law itself. But as we mentioned in class, reading laws, not so easy. Reading court cases, definitely not what you would take to the beach for your beach vacation. So in addition to accessing primary authorities, we will introduce the class to not all, but a sampling of secondary authorities, secondary sources that you'll find in the law library. These are really, really helpful. Secondary sources are our friends. The secondary sources collectively, and I say that as a group because there's many different kinds of secondary sources, they help us find the primary sources when we're kind of lost and we're like, oh my goodness, I can't find any cases that are relevant. Secondary sources also break down difficult legal concepts into more approachable language and understanding. And so we'll talk in a whole separate unit about secondary sources and how to use them. But just keep in mind now, when you access Westlaw in just a couple of weeks, when you go to a physical law library, you will find primary authorities, all those government entities, and secondary authorities. So right off the bat, you can kind of see what we're leading into today, which is we need a game plan. We need to make sense of all these sources so we're not just lost in a variety and diversity of sources, which are helpful, but we just don't want to be poking around and wandering the stacks or getting lost on Google. Okay, so let's keep going as we define all these authorities. In order to tackle the first of the authorities that we will learn about, which is case law, the first up is we're going to talk about case law. we have to introduce the concept of jurisdiction. Now, you may be familiar with this concept from other courses, from your reading, from just your experience, but it's really important in this class when we talk about doing legal research that we have a clear concept of what jurisdiction means. Because in this class, this is the how-to class. This is going to be, I have a hypothetical client or a real client with a real legal issue, and we're going to be asked to do some legal research for that client to help her or him or them with their legal matter. And in order to do that, in order to help our client, we need to understand jurisdiction. A textbook definition is jurisdiction is the power of a government body to act. Okay, what does that mean? It means that a specific government entity, and that could be a legislative branch or a courthouse, has vested authority to take that control of a legal action. So let's just do a pretty straightforward example involving a hypothetical car accident. Let's say I'm driving to work and I live in Massachusetts and I work in Massachusetts. And I'm driving on all local roads. Like I'm not taking some detour through New Hampshire or Rhode Island. So I'm driving to work and I get into a car accident with hypothetical person Bob. Let's imagine that Bob was texting while driving, wasn't paying attention to the road, changing the songs on his playlist, and we get into a car accident. And in my hypothetical situation, I suffer some injuries, I miss work, I have some damage, and now I would like to sue Bob in a court of law for the injuries that I suffered because of my car accident. So if that was your client and you wanted to do research to help me, let's say I'm your client and I ask, your attorney asks you to do research involving my hypothetical case, the first question we want to ask ourselves is, in what jurisdiction is this client's case? Another way of saying that is, where would this lawsuit even take place? So you might be saying, well, Massachusetts. And if you think that, then you're right, because we're talking about a plaintiff from Massachusetts, a defendant from Massachusetts, events that take place in Massachusetts. Would it make sense for me to bring my lawsuit in New York or Rhode Island or Maine? What if I want to take a vacation? I'm like, oh, I'll just sue Bob in California. Can I do that? You're probably thinking no. And you're right, the answer is no. But the reason that Massachusetts court is the right place, the right location for my lawsuit is because of the concept of jurisdiction. A Massachusetts court has jurisdiction over me, the plaintiff, Bob, the defendant. The events took place in Massachusetts. So a Massachusetts court is the right place for jurisdiction. Now, we can use lots of different examples where you might have a plaintiff from one state, a defendant from another state, and there might be two potential locations for jurisdiction. But in either case, if there's a state that has no contacts to the matter, to the plaintiff or the defendant, that's not a proper forum for jurisdiction. So we'll be talking very soon about how important it is to identify the jurisdiction where your client's case is. For example, if I asked you to do research on the car accident here involving two residents of Massachusetts, events that took place in Massachusetts, and you said, oh, that's great, I know how to do legal research, I'm going to research California law or Texas law. You wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to waste your time researching laws and court cases in the wrong jurisdiction. Nor would you really want to do like a 50-state survey of all the laws related to torts and car accidents. You'd be pretty busy and also pretty miserable. So we do want to narrow in on the jurisdiction. Now, not related to, but another concept that we'll talk about that's really critically important is the concept of precedent. This is really important in studying how U.S. law develops. We will, in about a month, read statutes. We will read the written word of the different legislative branches. But an important concept in understanding how legal analysis develops in the US is that we rely heavily on the concept of precedent, which means as a researcher, we want to know what happened to our client today. You know, what's my client here for? Car accident, employment discrimination, breach of contract, whatever the legal issue is facing our client today. But to help them resolve their legal issue and predict the outcome, we look at past decisions, court case decisions that covered and addressed similar topics. I say similar because you'll see through research, there's never a single case that's exactly like yours where the four corners of your client's case matches some other prior case, but there'll be a lot of similarities. And we as researchers are bound by the words and the decisions of precedent, of prior court cases that have resolved similar legal issues and have given us rules of law and guidance that we must follow today. That's the concept of precedent. And the reason I bring it up here now, as we're about to jump into understanding how to research court cases, is that any time we want to begin legal research of any matter, but specifically into researching court cases for our client, one of the initial questions we need to answer is, in what jurisdiction is my client's case? Because that tells us the precedent that we want to look at. If my client's case is taking place here in a Massachusetts state court, right, car accident that takes place here, would it make sense for me to research court cases from the Supreme Court of California addressing car accident tort law out there? The answer is probably not. And the reason probably not is because that is a different jurisdiction. So concepts we have to keep in mind relate to jurisdiction and precedent. And then I want to introduce a couple more vocabulary words here before we move on, which is mandatory and persuasive authority. One of your classmates, I think it was Anita, made a reference to this in class on Tuesday, and I'm glad she brought it up. This is also really broken down well in your book. I don't need you to memorize these concepts right now. We're going to talk about them now and in the next video. And then when I see you in class on Tuesday, I'm not going to repeat everything I've just said in the video. We're actually going to jump right into an in-class exercise on mandatory and persuasive authority. I might even ask you to do a little bit of it before coming to class. Let's see how far I get. But what it means is all these authorities, and I mean authorities like cases, statutes, administrative regulations, secondary sources, these are all authorities for us to look up. They're not all created equal. When we begin to discuss our client's research and we're beginning to say, okay, I need to research, tort cases in Massachusetts, we learn what jurisdiction we are in, and then that helps to determine, as we do that research, and I find court case over here, and I click here and I find this court case, which one of those court cases that I locate through my research, in other words, of the precedent that I find, which ones are mandatory or binding on me such that I have to adhere to that law now, and which one is persuasive. So we're going to talk in the next slide about determining those, but my homework for you right this second is before you put on video number 2, I want you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, nothing fancy, and I want you to be ready to draw some triangles. We're going to do that together, and that's going to help us understand the hierarchy of courts and how to interpret whether an authority is mandatory or persuasive. So as promised, I'm at 14.5 minutes. This is the end of video number 1. I will see you at video number 2.